color. Kind of see my picture off there to the side. Can't see all of it, but you'll see it as soon as I get it made. I'm then going to a new layer, which is the far mountains, and this is very important. You work from the back to the front when you do a landscape, and I'm just using a brush called Fancy Painter. I wanted a painterly effect, and it really doesn't matter what brush you start with. The goal here is not to be photographic, but to make a painting based on your photographic source. It'd be wonderful if we could go outside with tablets and just paint from nature, but we can't do that. So we're going to do it from photos, but I don't want you to really copy the photograph. I want you to use the photo as a resource to make your own painting. You can see that I've come to a second layer, the middle mountains, and I'm just putting in values and colors. I haven't really made a lot of decisions. I remember originally when I started this painting, I wanted the background layer to be very light, the far mountains to be very light, and work atmospheric perspective coming forward. And so that's kind of what I'm doing as I go forward with this. Just filling in color. You can see how early on I moved the horizon down because I didn't feel like I had it correct, and now I'm just filling in lights and darks. I'm not dead accurate to the painting by a long shot. Warming things up as opposed to lightening things, which is always useful in a painting. Sometimes you can get colors to advance or do what you want to do simply by warming them as opposed to choosing a lighter color, and that's what I'm up to here. Generally getting a sense of what's going on. I have a new layer now, the Valley Plain, I call it. Sorry you can't see all of the photograph. If you can't, I'm not really sure how this is recording. I'm kind of a novice with this stuff. And just filling in a sort of warmer green because the warms are going to be in my advancing colors, and they will fall out as you go back towards the horizon. You'll get cooler and cooler with your colors. Often lighter, although you can see a little bit in this picture that they're not really getting a lot lighter. So eventually I'll have to make some decisions about that. Right now I'm setting myself up gesturally, not super careful, just putting in the shapes where I think they're going to go. This video is about 3 times normal speed, and the problem I have with speeding them up is that it gives you the impression that you should be working this fast, and nobody does. It also makes me look a lot more decisive than I might be. Actual time on the completed landscape was a little over 90 minutes, and I did pause a couple of times to just get away from it and think about it, or just get away from it and not think about it. Now I'm in the front layer, which I have still got a label as foreground, or I think I call this the framing layer. There's an element here on the left that was not in the photograph, and I felt like I wanted a framing element, a couple of framing elements in front. So what I'm doing now is just working it out with a couple of different brushes. I'm still using this Fancy Painter brush, which is real squiggly and crazy, hoping that it'll give me a painterly effect. Changing lights and darks, thinking about where the sun is going to hit these things and how I can resolve them. I knew I wanted a bright plant in the front. This is a scene from the island of Kauai in Hawaii, very pretty, but it's just an ordinary snapshot. There's nothing special about it. It's just a memento as opposed to an artistic photograph, which I don't know how to take. So I will bring it back now, and I will take the photograph and I'll turn it into something a little more artistic with a bit of luck. Remember, the key here is to stick with your levels as long as you can. I often forget. I'm back in the just above the background layer now, and I'm thinking about doing some clouds, and I pulled a clouder brush. This is from my brush kit called Best Landscapers, and I just couldn't resist. I'd originally thought about painting the clouds with the same brush I painted everything else, but as I said, I just couldn't resist. So I'm using, there are actually 4 different cloud brushes, I call them. In the landscapers, they're actually called smoke. And I'm testing a few of them out, and I'm playing with color, lights and darks. You can see because it's behind all my other layers, I don't have to sweat the horizon at all. I don't have to be too careful as I come into the edges of the cloud layer where they hit the mountains. And I'm just playing light and dark here. And again, experimenting with brush size, different brushes, seeing what kind of effect I get, staying in that sort of purple-blue range, and then moving it way up to the top left corner of my picker and getting the very light, almost white, until it looks like clouds. And now I'm back into those mountains. I've decided that they didn't look so good light like they were, so I'm picking up blue color. And I have changed my brush from Fancy Painter to, I forget, Fun Painter, Good Painter, Reed's Favorite Painter. I can't remember. Some of you have used this brush already, and you'll recognize it as it gets a little bigger. It's just a nice, not completely crisp shape, and it allows me, as long as my movements are primarily diagonally and left right as opposed to up and down, I can get about what I want. And I'm putting just little hints of green back there because they do, to my vision, they showed up in the photograph, and I wanted to get some variety into those far mountains and make them look a little bit more interesting, more real, and still retain the painterly effect. So I'm moving my brush in the direction of some of these valleys back there, and then I'm just composing as I go over to the other ridge of the mountains, which clearly now I've got to fix. These movements you see now are actually following elements that I can see on the mountains in the photograph. So I'm trying to follow the shape and direction of ridges and valleys in that mountain range. A little atmospheric effect now. That's that same brush, and I'm just picking colors of the clouds and sweeping directly over. You can see I'm not being super careful here. It's not really going to matter. And now I'm really working the contrast between the ridge that's a little closer to me. I want to make sure that it doesn't fade too quickly into that back mountain range, because I did want to note that there was a difference between the two, that one was actually in front of the other. And now I'm coming in much more carefully across the top of the mountain. Again, I'm speeded up ×3. Looks like I'm doing it in about 10 seconds, but I'm not. I'm not really convinced I'm doing it in 30 seconds. There's something about this speeded up stuff that is very deceptive. I'm actually working fairly carefully. You can see I changed my mind there, and Control Z, and I started over. Just adding lights and darks, trying very hard to get it contrasting but not draw very hard lines in that area. Just work with color, as big a brush as I can manage, and there are times when the brush needs to be, in this instance, fairly small, just to get a little bit of precision. You can tell by looking at the photo, there are some pretty, I guess you'd call them hard edge lines there. And so I'm just trying to make that, get that illusion together, that one thing is in front of another thing. And I'm working kind of with jagged up and down movements to get the sensation of the trees that are back there in those mountains. Small revisions, and I think the most important thing to remember when you're painting your landscape from a photograph is just stay loose with it. You can fix anything. The important thing is to get all the elements into the painting really rapidly, so you can see your entire painting all the time. So I quickly put the 4 layers in that I needed, and you shouldn't need more than that. A lot of times I'll do this on 1 layer, and I'll usually kick myself when I do that because it's a lot harder. I have to worry much more about coming up to edge lines, horizon lines, things like that. So keeping your layers together, but getting everything in there, even if it doesn't quite look right, because you will be able to fix everything, especially if you're organized. And I'm trying very hard to stay organized. What happens to me is I'll notice something, say in the cloud layer or the far mountains, and I won't be in that layer, and I'll run up there and I'll fix it. And then if I want to adjust something later, I have a lot more work to do because I'll have to fix it in that other layer too, or erase it out or something like that. Here there's these muddy, what you're seeing here is actually a taro field. And there are muddy areas and green areas and areas of deeper water. So I'm just trying to note that this is a worked agricultural area. And so it's going to be more organized. You're not going to see, you're, I should say, you're going to see more geometric elements in here because guys have been out there working and they have roads and paths, and the fields are laid out in a pretty regular fashion, although they do flood in different ways. So you'll see brown areas where there's water, and then I've taken the sky color and put a little sky color over the muddy water. There are other areas that aren't muddy at all. Some of these areas, I'm not really sure what they were. This trip was a very long time ago. And now again, I'm just laying out the geometry of this. My perspective lines aren't perfect, but they're not terrible, so I'm not going to get too worked up about it. Trying to create some interest in this middle valley plain area. And again, because I've got my front bushes on their own layer, I don't have to be careful about that edge, which means that I can work a lot more freely with brushy strokes, and it's a whole lot more fun for me because I don't have to sweat it. Now the fun part, I'm able to put in some trees, and they're just little pop 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 motions with my brush or my stylus. And for me, that kind of detail or symbol is always fun to make because it's very easy and it enhances the work a lot. I'm about 45 minutes into the actual painting. So it does take a little bit of time. But again, you can see that I'm working, still working pretty instinctively and just trying to adjust color, adjust shape, make it look a little more like it has been groomed, has man-made areas in it. I am following a lot of the shape that's in the photograph as well. It's very helpful. If you get to this point in your painting and you say, no, I see it a different way, pop a layer in there and paint it and see if you like it that way. You can always take it out. Often in this kind of painting I will put just what I call an experimental layer above where I'm going to be working, and I will work on that for a little while. And if it works, here's what you have to do. You just merge it down, Control E or Command E, merge it into your painting. A lot of students will end up painting like this with 30 layers because they're afraid that they've made a mistake or something they did they may change their mind about, and that's too much. You have to train yourself to be confident that even if you have that sensation later in a work that you did too much or you wish you hadn't done it this way or that way, um, you can fix it and it'll enhance the painting. And zooming in now, working so you can see a little more clearly. I'm working on these bushes, and they were very bright green in my eyes, and the brights were just not. I had kind of a, I guess you'd call it an emerald green working. The bushes very close to the camera, and I really thought it would work, but I had a lot of trouble in here trying to suggest the movement of the branches and the variety of leaves. I tried texture brushes and I tried putting spacing on a brush, and just seems like nothing worked correctly. You'll notice now I've switched brushes again. I'm using a marking pen, simulated marking pen. And I really liked it. It was giving me a lot of variety of shape, and as I moved it this way and that, it was doing crazy things that I didn't anticipate. Once again, you see me framing out these bushes or changing the uh, outline of these bushes on the bush layer, which is actually now, I should have been using my eraser because this would be a problem later in the painting if I wanted to just change the bush's color or something. It would also change on the plane. Not an enormous problem. You can erase through at that point. And I'm just working it out. I'm just trying to work now compositionally, and I'm trying to get that left hand set of bushes, which are a complete invention, to get in front of everything else. And this was probably the hardest part of the painting for me. You'll notice I've switched to a warm orange color, and this was kind of experimental, and then I switched this white color and I really liked it. It gave me the sensation that light was hitting certain leaves and not other leaves, and some were shiny and some were not, and that kind of cacophony of shape that happens in bushes. I'm not a person who's going to sit down and draw like crazy. I'm just going to try to make it suggestive. Of course, I have brushes that will make branches and leaves and all of those things, and I welcome you to try them. I think it's fun. But in this painting, I wanted to show you that it's not completely necessary, and I wanted to just work as long as I could with just ordinary brushes. I think I have about 2 or 3, maybe 4 that I've used so far. Not one very different from the other. Here I'm getting smart and using an eraser instead of a brush to groom that left side. Some warm colors now. I'm trying to see if I can change the look of the painting. Didn't like it. Decided against it. And now what I'm going to do, I Shift Control Alt E. I've made a new layer that is a merge of all the layers, and I'm going to try some filters on it to see if I can get some texture. Poster Edges is my go-to filter all the time. It seems to help me. I'm experimenting with different sliders on it, and I've finally decided, sure, that's fine. I'm going to bring it in, change the opacity, erase out some things that didn't work very well. A little too much detail in the background from those poster edges, so I'm just working with my eraser. Clean it up a little bit. I love what happened in the front with the bushes, so I'm going to keep that. And now I'm going to work back in on the left, and I'm going to darken it way down just to get that framing element to work a little better. And a little more grooming here and there, and soon I'll be done. Thanks a lot for watching. Here's one last thing I wanted to show you very quickly. I've made a duplicate layer of my merged layer, and this is everything I've seen so far. And I'm just going to check a few things. One, I wanted to see how it looked in a multiply. To see if I get any joy out of this, I can play with the opacity, and you get a sort of a darker scene. It's not really my cup of tea, and a lot of times I'll just run through several layer modes and see if I like it any better, and I advise you to do that too before you turn things in. But instead of doing that, I'm going to go to Filter, and I'm going to go to the Filter Gallery, as I usually do, and just see if anything looks better. Here's the entire picture. It's already in a watercolor mode. I'm going to just try a few things. Here's film grain, and I can say, well, maybe not. Poster edges I've already done with it. Go back to cutout and see if that is cool. It's a completely different kind of look. It's kind of a woodblock or woodcut look. It's really cool. It could be useful for certain things. Don't know if I'm really going to do it on this one. And I'll run through a whole bunch of these things. I'll look at Sumi brush strokes on it and see if I like that. Again, it's very similar. I might be able to use this part down here, or I kind of like some of what's going on back in the mountains. I can play with a bunch of different things. Actually, I think this spatter might be interesting, and you can see how it changes especially these near portions, and make them really interesting. So what I could do is say, okay, I'm going to use that, and then that applies to what I've got going here, and then I can just get my eraser out and I can start erasing things that I want to look like they always looked. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to do all this stuff and get it back to where it was, but I think I'm going to leave those near bushes for the most part. And I'm just kind of randomly bringing out detail in them now with my eraser, stuff that I might want to get back, and I'm just really freely and easily scribbling through this thing and just seeing if I like this any better. So that's one thing. I want you to check your filters, and I'm going to go again with this one, and I'm going to put another filter on it, Shift Control Alt E, and I'm going to get rid of this now so we can see where we are at. And now I'm going to come back and try again. So I go Filter, and I'm going to go to Filter Gallery. In this case, I'm going down to Texture. Let's get so we can see the entire thing. And I'm going to try this crackle texture. As you can see, it creates a kind of a, I don't know if you can see it on your monitor, but it's going to create kind of a canvas texture on this. And I can play with the depth of the cracks, make them a little darker, as you can see, although I don't really care for that. The spacing, maybe it needs to be a little closer together, so I'll try that. I sort of lost everything I gained there. So I'm going to push it up a little bit, and you have to move these sliders far enough that you can actually see what's going on in your image. So now I go OK, like that, and here's my new look. And now I can change the opacity of it. If it's a little too much, I can change it. I'm going to keep it completely opaque. Got nothing to lose on this. Here's my other layer. So that was that one. This is this one. And it's kind of cool. It gives it a sort of an embossed look, and a hard to or next to impossible look to accomplish in a painting. That's it. That's all I wanted to show you.